as best you can. But like I said, it's not business as usual. It's business as unusual, and you got to try and operate in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. Now, just speaking of as an aside, as business as unusual, we did actually have to pull down our Zoom link. Unfortunately, YouTube's becoming a little cautious of anything with COVID-19 in the title. Sorry, our YouTube link. Yep. I've just reposted that YouTube link into the comments section, and that'll hopefully get back underway. But just doing that now, and then we're back up and going again.
Also, the new skills category, I think.
Now, so that's the people in the service department. Obviously, it's a very important part of the. It's going to be very important for profitability of dealers this year, I imagine. Now, what about in the sales department? Any thoughts as whether salespeople are necessarily essential enough to have everyone in the showroom, considering, and we'll get to this in a minute, the showroom is closed. Now, I know that some dealers are taking this in different ways, and some are in the showroom but spaced out, but others, I believe, still have their sales staff working remotely. Anyone got a take on that?
Do you want to hit that first, or?
Well, I'll have a quick run at it. Again, it comes back down to how can you operate your business safely. If you're doing by appointment viewings, or if you're doing online transactions and arranging collection times, then you got to look at how much time does the sales staff need to be on site for. And again, it comes back to your systems. Can they access your sales systems and your databases from home? Or do they need to be on site for those sorts of transactions and getting those things done? In which case, you are going to have enough people on site to cover whatever your load is in terms of transactions. How many you have, again, comes down to the size of your business, how busy you have been. Even in the sales area, we have heard that there's been a bit of pent-up demand. There's been, it's not a return to pre-lockdown activity, but hearing numbers, upwards of over 500, 600 inquiries a day that need to be actioned. So, this is the sort of activity that you're going to need to try and figure out how to manage. And so, again, like I said, depending on your business, will depend on how many people you feel you need in on site at any one time.
But you are allowed to have staff in your showroom, provided that they're following rules. Is that correct, from a legal perspective, or as much as we can get to a legal perspective?
That is true, but at this level, we are not supposed to be having customer-facing personnel. And so having personnel in a showroom, perhaps to clean the cars, but we shouldn't be inviting customers into showrooms. With appointments, perhaps they can, everybody can have different processes, but ideally we are managing cross-contamination, we're managing all the things that are required by health and safety at this level.
I guess the question is, and I'll put it to Mark, this is kind of in your guys' area, if you've got your sales staff are processing digital leads, they are arranging appointments for people to potentially come and test drive vehicles, or handling processing finance and insurance applications and so forth. Can they be doing that in the showroom? Should they really be doing it at home? What's your thought there?
Yeah, I think in most cases there doesn't need to be really any more than one person on site. But I think what's important is they can then do it off demand and based off what inquiries that they have got, what appointments they've got booked. They can. There's not many that are going to be overwhelmed with a huge number of overlapping appointments in any one day at this current level. So it's really about spacing them out, managing the customer's expectations, and making them very aware at that moment in time what the protocol is once you arrive at the dealership. You know, so I think, yes, they can do a lot of that remotely, but in terms of being on site, it would make sense to travel to the location, spend the day there, getting whatever needed to be prepared for any appointments. If people were to view vehicles, having that ready, located outside the dealership would be the ultimate. I know that's quite difficult with some dealerships, but at the very least, getting the vehicle onto the road and having the customers view it there or in a very safe place. The ones with warehouses and roller doors that they can pull down, that's easy. Where you've got gates, your gates shouldn't really technically be open either. And it's about how you manage that. I do know we've had some feedback from some dealerships where they're doing their very best to comply, but the public are the ones not complying. And that's a challenge, where they are trying to educate people on. I had one example where the dealer was there with a customer that had made an appointment to come and look at the car. Another customer turns up with a car full of family members, and they all try and pile out of the car and take off around the dealership. So lots of different little challenges that dealers will face, but yeah, definitely I think it's about slowing everything down and kind of doing the basics. And it's what is, I'd say, common sense really, in terms of how do we methodically go through this. I know every dealer's just chafing at the bit to sell some cars and get some cash flow happening again. There's no denying that, but I think just being controlled, and you know, I think customers being told this is an option of when you can, a day and a time that you can come and view that vehicle. That I think they've got to respect that as well, because you're looking after their safety as well as your staff. So yeah, I just don't think that for most dealerships from the sales perspective that they're needing to arm up with multiple salespeople on site at this point in time.
Yeah, and sorry, horror stories aside, if I can just reiterate that one point, managing customer expectations. I mean, we can put any processes in place and they may sound like a horror story, but if the customer's prepared to deal with them, then it's just educating them beforehand of what they're going to have to deal with when they come in. And then it's their decision whether they come in or not.
The next question is something that you got, that both Kit and Mark, you've touched on already. My understanding of the rules in regards to access to the yard is the gates, the doors. I'm talking about the yard, not the showroom. Showroom definitively must remain closed. No one can enter the showroom. But the yard, the gates need to remain closed unless someone's coming on for a specific appointment to collect a vehicle. Is that the read on it?
Well, there's no requirement that the gate remain closed. The requirement is that it's not open to the general public. So correct. You can put whatever processes or virtual gates you want up, as long as you don't have the general public coming in, because then you can't manage cross-contamination and you can't manage contact.
Yeah, I'd say on that right now, I mean, if you're an example would be that the dealership that would traditionally drop all their gates around their perimeter down, their fencing down, push all their cars out and have all their flags up. That's not something that you'd be wanting to do right now, because you're inviting somebody from WorkSafe and to probably really look at your business. Then I'd be doing your best to kind of look as if you remain closed, but you're operational.
So how do you make that work in a yard where you don't have those big fences? I was speaking to a yard who has pretty much just a chain around the yard, and the discussion he had was, what can he do? Put up signage, put up notices saying don't come on. Any ideas on how people can deal with that?
That's about it. I mean, it wasn't a dealership; it's a repairer. I went past the other day, and so the repairer, he has his garage, his workshop area, and then he's got a parking lot area out the front. There's no fencing, but what he has done is he's taken cones, road cones, and an emergency tape, and he's created a perimeter. That's sort of as much as they've done to make sure that people know that they can't just step across that car park area. Putting some signs up as well, just to sort of say, please use, dedicated entrance around the front or something. It's controlling. So, you know, and I sympathize with those out there watching who are dying for us to bang off a list of 8 things that they can go and do. But you know, unfortunately, we're sort of doing the best we can in terms of interpreting what has been put out there. So there, even the information coming from government is slightly different in slightly different places. And what we've tried to do, I would think all of us, and certainly the VIA task was looking at this, and you know, I must give kudos to VIA and Kit especially, and David for putting together that group to try and nut this out. You know, most of the time people might think the trade associations want to fight against each other, but we actually work really well with each other, and that was really good. But you've got to try and think about, you know, you've got to look in a whole lot of different areas to try and figure out what the government is actually saying you can do, and it's difficult. MB has the lead on retail, but transport has the lead on transport. WorkSafe has the lead on coming in and saying whether or not you're doing things right, and they're going to look back to MOT and MB. So, you know, it is a hodgepodge of things out there that we've tried to pull together to help people understand what they can do. But as we've said a few times now, it does come back down to, you know, your circumstance and your lot. So yeah, so in terms of trying to discourage people, it is that communication with the customer. If they've connected with you digitally, you know, you need to be going back to them and saying, right, well, if you need to come and look, we can't go on into the showroom. We can go on the yard. You know, we're going to have to stay away from each other. I can show you this. I can show you that. There will be a process where we, you know, restrict that contact, and I think even one good guide is just looking at the alert levels. Alert level 1 is prepare. Alert level 2 is reduce. Alert level 3 is restrict, and alert level 4 is eliminate. And those words are about contact. So alert level 3 is restricting contact. So we need to restrict the amount of contact that we have, but restriction is not the elimination that we had in lockdown. Restriction is minimize that contact as much as possible. When we head towards level 2, it's reduce.
I think in the case of the access to a yard, and I think this probably applies to a lot of these rules, is it's as much as anything, it would be fair to say that it's to show MB, WorkSafe, which as someone's noted is part of WorkSafe, and the other powers that may become involved in this, the very least you've attempted to interpret and follow process. It's all very well saying, well, all I can do is put a piece of tape up. No one, people might just going to walk onto the yard, but that's better than doing nothing. And at least it shows you put some thought into restricting and controlling access to the yard, rather than just open slather. Is that a fair statement? It's showing that you've actually thought through the process.
Yeah, I think that's that is the part of it. Yes, WorkSafe is part of MB, but I think if you go and talk to the WorkSafe people, they'd like to think they have their own personalities and autonomy. But yeah, I mean, you've got to make a go of it, and just follow. You know, if there are basic rules, the basic rules are restrict contact, minimize that contact, clean everything. It's clean things and clean people. So hand wash, wiping down surfaces, any sort of contact points, and the tracing. I know that there's a question in the Q&A about recording, and that's absolutely necessary because the Ministry of Health needs anyone who's come onto your yard or and engaged with you. They need to know who that is, and they need to know your staff members who's on site and who's worked with each other. You know, those are the 3 basics.
Has anyone got any thoughts on the best way? Our next question is, what are the requirements around contact tracing? Anyone got any thoughts on the best way to do that? I know we've seen a number of software providers within the industry start to offer solutions to that already. Well, they had that up and running pretty much near the start of level 3. Mark, I believe you guys have looked in that area as well. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of the requirements for contact tracing?
I think the stepping back from what different systems and tools that various people have in the industry and that we've had available for our dealers, it's getting back to the common sense around how can we record who comes into this dealership and has been in here and when, and at its very most basic sense, having a book or a piece of paper that you can document that on would be what I would say is a bare minimum requirement of having that, and then you can kind of go from there. So if you don't have any systems or any other tools, just getting a notebook and having a procedure in the business around this is how we record individuals, this is who we're recording. I believe even down to the courier driver that drops off a parcel or a part. So yeah, just documenting it manually, I believe, is the first most basic fundamental, and then you can kind of scale it across whatever systems or other tools that you have that allow you to do so. Even having some tools, I've seen some people kind of having website links they can click on and QR codes and bits and pieces, and you're still then relying upon the individual that visits to go and do that. That's actually, I don't think, is good enough to rely on somebody else to record that information. And I think if they are, then great. And if you're doubling up on the information, that's all good. But the dealership has to take responsibility of recording who has come into the business, what time, when, and who else was present at that time, and then be able to report on that if it's needed. And there's various ways of reporting on it, from providing a copy of your book through to Excel spreadsheets or more automated kind of reporting that can come out of various systems. But yeah, record not only the movement of external people to the dealership, but also who's on site at that moment in time from within the staff that are at that dealership as well.
So contact tracing is important, not just for the people coming in, the customers, but also for the staff, suppliers, teams that enter the yard.
100%.
So contact tracing is one thing. Is it viable to do with customers with a book when you can't really get in contact with them? I mean, is this something that you're better off doing digitally, or is it still possible simply to fill these things in by asking people data? And how much of this, I guess, is an extension of existing lead kind of management that we do within dealerships already? I mean, I can't imagine there's too many people that walk onto a car yard, speak to someone, and don't end up with their name and phone number recorded somewhere.
Is that for Kit or me?
Oh, you can answer it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to know everyone else's opinion, but I think, there's this weird perception around contactless, almost as if it needs to be completely humanless, but it's really about restricting and distancing. And you can have a conversation with someone, even if they have arrived on the yard, in the 3, 4, 5 meters away from you. You can stop them in that process and go, hey, look, before you enter our yard, we just need to go through these things with you because it's really important that we record this and for your own safety, etc., etc. So I think recording that manually can be done in person, but at a distance, and that's kind of where it sits from that perspective. So I don't know if that's wrong or not, but I think that's something that can easily be done.
Next question, and it's one where I know Greg's got a particular side in it, and I know that plenty of other dealers out there are attempting it. But can you offer test drives? We got to do kind of definitive answer as much as we can on whether or not you can allow customers to come and drive your cars. Now, we've had some discussion around the place, then there is definitely activity in the market where new car distributors are either allowing customers to come on pre-arranged visits to a site to collect vehicles where the keys have been left in them. And we've had all sorts of ways promoted by companies around pairing phones to Bluetooth. They can be talked through the car by staff and so forth, or the car being left outside the yard on the road, or quite often the common option being pushed as the vehicle is actually delivered to the customer's house, home for a test drive. What's everyone's take here on the ability to test drive? Greg, do you want to expand a little on your opposition to test driving, I guess?
Well, as I say, I mean, we were having a wee pre-chat before the webinar, but again, I suppose it comes back to that basic guidance of, can you do this safely? And do you have the wherewithal and the resources to undertake a safe, restricted contact test drive? And that involves you as a business owner being prepared to allow someone to take the car away, because we certainly could not recommend or suggest that you have a staff member in a vehicle with the driver, with the test driver. What do you put in place? Do you want to have seat covers on the? You got to think about everything. If we're restricting contact and we're going to keep everything clean, you're going to lay out seat covers on that car. If they've gone off by themselves, you don't know if they've pulled over somewhere and done the business all through the car of checking the back seats, pulling on the seat belts, looking in the boot, lifting this up, lifting that up. You will need to go through that car afterwards and clean it, wipe down everything. So really it comes back to, can I operate my business in a safe way that has kept everything clean and restricted contact, and do I want to do it that way? Or as I've seen suggested on the Motor Central website, maybe I just remind the customer of their ability to come back to me with any issues, and come back, and even offer up a guarantee within the first few days of look, no questions asked, we'll just turn this around, and cancel the deal. But again, that comes back to your business model. Can you do that? Are you doing that? Do you have the resources to do it? Ultimately, from a practical point of view, I just feel that lends itself to saying avoid test drives at this point. We're in level 3 for a couple of weeks. Might be, who knows what the decision is going to be next Monday. Maybe we can start looking at coming out of that into level 2, and maybe we just focus on those customers who know what they want and contact you digitally and are happy to just take the car away, and they'll come back to you if there's any problems.
Yeah, I kind of join the comparison to how they would interact with an out-of-town buyer right now, that would be buying or purchasing that vehicle sight unseen. And it's, what process do you go through with them? How do you reassure them of the quality of that vehicle and what they're going to experience, and if they've got any problems? And so I think if they kind of treat the current buyers as if they're an out-of-town buyer and kind of handle them from that perspective, that's good. So totally agree with what you're saying there.
Not only an out-of-town buyer, but someone who actually has COVID-19. Because you don't know. So every potential customer is potentially infected. So you need to treat them as if they have it just in case, to keep both you, your customer, and potentially and staff and potentially other customers safe as well. So can you do test drives? If I told you, if I came in and had COVID-19, would you let me take a test drive in your car? So if you are convinced that you can clean it satisfactorily afterwards and avoid any cross-contamination, if you have processes in place, then I would say go ahead. If you don't, then don't.
This one may be something that I need to come back to afterwards in a story on AutoTalk, to be honest. But in the Q&A kit, your colleague Malcolm Yorston has noted that, I'm not sure on where the information comes from, but that police have actually issued tickets to customers out on test drives. Now, I'm guessing that revolves around whether or not test drives are considered essential travel, because we are still under some level of essential travel restrictions at the moment. Was there any discussion with the NZTA during the work group process as to whether test drives were simply allowed to be taken from a driving on the road perspective?
Well, I can give you the instructions we've had from government, very simple. They have issued guidelines on what should not happen and what should happen. all health and safety related guidelines. If you can meet those guidelines, then you can do it. That's the best answer we've got from government. Lots of cringing when we ask the question because they understand how important it is to our business. And so the option is either they don't let us open because we can't test drive cars, or they just let us figure it out. And
we'll do some more research on that one, because it sounds like it's an interesting legal position if they are doing that. So we'll do some digging on that for later. I'm just going to go to a comment at the moment from Mark Vidak in the Q&A section. He comments that very few, if any, customers will purchase virtually a vehicle without a test drive, provided the vehicle is left with the customer sanitized, and then the vehicle is sanitized after the test drive. Then why not? Vehicles are not widgets. I think it's a very valid point. I think to the converse, vehicle purchases without test drives aren't exactly new to the industry. I mean, I know certainly a lot of around the country selling of new and used cars, well, probably actually more used cars than new cars goes on in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think
all the South Island dealers seem to sell cars to the North Island when I chatted around the place to them. Mark, you may have some more ideas on that from statistics you've seen out of your system. And overseas, it's in some places quite normal. If you take America, the large used car distributors, the warehouses there like Carvana, that kind of thing, are very used to selling vehicles and then putting them on a truck a long distance. Mark, any take on the long distance? How much the market does that make up these days?
I wouldn't be able to guess really, but I think for every dealership, it's very different. South Island's an interesting one that you mentioned that, and I think there's more dealerships down there that I've had conversations with that do sell out of town and specifically into the North Island for whatever reason. And I think it's very much down to what the dealership and business has been used to doing. There are dealerships that have never sold out of the area after hundreds or thousands of vehicle sales. Conversely, though, there are some dealerships where 60, 70, I know of a couple that have been nudging near 80% of their vehicle sales out of their area with the vehicles sight unseen. And that's just their standard business practice. Their testimonials attest to their credibility, and they leverage that accordingly, and they can kind of give their customers that trust and experience, and that's just what they're used to doing. So I think for them, it's very much almost business as usual. But again, yeah, I think it comes back to, we've probably got a collective interpretation between us here that you shouldn't be doing test drives under level 3. But if you do choose to do them, it's ensuring that you are treating that vehicle as if not only, as Kit says, your customer has the virus, but also as if you've got it yourself. You've gone and touched the vehicle, and how are you handling yourself with that vehicle? And I think there was the best piece of advice that ever came out during this really was around act as if you've got the virus and you don't want to make other people sick. And I think that's no different. And if it's still, your business typically needs to have vehicles being test driven because you don't have a lot of out-of-town buyers and you're not used to it, and you make that decision to allow vehicles to be test driven, then you need to be very disciplined around your process and how you handle that. Even to Via's point about ensuring that you've got it documented, so not only you but everybody that is in the business that could come into contact with a customer or a vehicle understands what your procedures are and how you're going to abide by them. So yeah.
Would it be fair to say that that may be something, the whole test drive thing may be something that's easier for the new vehicle industry to complete, simply because they tend to have larger teams, larger service departments, the ability to probably sanitize on a more proactive basis than the used vehicle side of the trade would?
I don't know. And no more people should be working on their yard than are working on a used car dealer yard at the moment. So
I've got another little comment here from Rob M. We've had multiple people purchase vehicles without test drive. All comes down to trust building and personability. Back to basics. So yeah. I think we've kind of on the whole test thing. It seems to be a bit of a, yet again, it's an open for interpretation thing. Sounds like the panel and the rules that are the way they're written are leaning more towards not really, but by the same token, I think for many it's it's going to have to be a necessity of business, and it's their interpretation that's allowing them to do that. Let's move forward with that. What do you need to do to deliver vehicles or have them collected? I mean, is it really just have the car sanitized? I mean, does someone need to make an appointment to come and pick up their vehicle? Do you need to do the same if you're sending vehicles out and drop them to your home? Is there any structure or thoughts around rules you should have for the pickup and delivery of vehicles out to customers?
I think it's probably less about the actual pickup than how you treat cars every day and after each contact. So instead of cleaning the car really, I mean, assuming the car is already generally clean, instead of cleaning the car really well before they pick up, you just clean it after each contact, and then you don't have to worry about any cross-contamination. And then when you sell it, you just have to worry about the edge of the door and the key.
When you're handing over vehicles, you literally can't hand over the keys though, can you? You've got to have an air gap between you and the customer. Is it leave the vehicle keys in the car? Is it on a table? Any thoughts around that? Those two options, those options are fine. Through the letterbox in a paper envelope, as I saw on a video from Mitsubishi Motors.
Yeah, I mean, it's as we've sort of said, it depends on the layout of your business. What have you got? What sort of thing? What resources? I mean, you could have a series of drop boxes for different vehicles and tag them with the license plate so that customers know which box to reach in and take the keys out of. But that said, I mean, again, Mark sort of made the comment about, we're not talking about being completely dehumanized here. I mean, you could still be in speaking distance to the people to direct them to where's the box, where have I put the key. It really can't be that much different of the handover process of it's just you're not standing right next to them. You're not giving them a pat on the back as they get into the car and wishing them well on their journey. You're doing that from at least 2 meters away, having left the keys in a place that they can collect them or grab them. The paperwork is another interesting thing. Obviously, you're going to be wanting to do the paperwork digitally where you can. In the Warrant of Fitness space, we've spoken with NTA and they've agreed that the customer sheet can be photographed by the vehicle inspector and emailed or texted to the customer. So in that case, there's no longer need to even leave a piece of paper behind in the vehicle after a warrant of fitness inspection has been done. So there are ways of dealing with the documentation so that that's not nothing. And as Kit said, you need to have just given that car a really good clean, which is not going to be a lot different from what I would guess many dealers already do because you're not letting someone get into a car and drive off the yard that's got, a crushed up McDonald's bag in the back seat and some fries all over. You've tidied that car up, you've cleaned it. You want the customer to drive off in a car that they think, this is awesome, this is my new car. Even if it's, even used, you want to give them that impression of this is my new thing. That they're happy with to take away. So, so you're going to keep it clean. And it's really just a matter of finding a way to have the keys available for them to pick up. Looking at Wellington weather today, we are running into issues around weather with repair shops. You can't have the customers sitting in the waiting room in weather like this. What can you do? So that's already a practical issue that we haven't really found an answer to yet. But these are operational things, practical things, depending on your layout, your site, that each business owner is going to have to sit down and think through, using those guiding principles of minimizing and restricting contact and keeping it clean.
There's some dealers that have come up with an interesting solution to that one, Greg, that I've heard over in the place, and that a couple of them have gone and hired or had marquees that they've gone and popped up outside the doors, which I guess kind of stretches the interpretation of not letting people allowed into the showroom.
Yeah. Well, you know, if it's a roof with no walls and just a couple of spindles holding it up, yeah, room. I'm not sure. That's one of the things we'll probably look into ourselves and go and get some advice on.
I think one other thing to add to that is this I guess there's going to be varying degrees of this as we progress down into level 2, and who knows how long level 2 hangs around for, and then level 1, and then people's thoughts and feelings beyond that. So whether that's all combined 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months of some uncertainty from varying customers, and it's a really good opportunity now for, as dealerships do the right thing and are seen to be doing the right thing in their customers' eyes, that feedback that they can gather from those customers as well, that actually then helps them set themselves up for future prospective customers, because dealers want to be receiving testimonials around how good their process was with looking after the customer's safety, because you can then use that for the next customer and the next customer. So dealers can't take a view that this is only for another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. There are going to be degrees of this that are new business practice for them for many months to come. And I think if you have a longer vision on it, then you put more weight into doing these things right.
I think it's interesting. We've seen a lot of vehicle distributors switch to pick up and drop off, or offering pick up and drop off free for vehicle servicing. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, the next time I get my car serviced, even outside of this, I don't really want to have to go to the dealership. So that's something that people are unfortunately, are really going to get used to and want in the future, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Going back to the comment before in regards to test drives, and this is probably a question for you, Kit, around whether they're legal for them to go out there, whether they're essential travel. I guess the question is probably a little simpler when it comes to dropping off vehicles at customers' homes. That's arguably delivering a product in the same way as any courier. Isn't it? It's that could be argued it's essential travel because it's essentially transport.
I don't know what the right answer is for that, but if we imagine that we are infected, would I really want to be taking the product, dropping it off at someone's house? I mean, I have to make sure I have to bring enough things to clean the car after I get out. And we run into all the same problems as test drives, except now I potentially infected the vehicle and I'm giving the vehicle to another customer. So there's problems there as well.
And then you've got to figure out how to get back again.
Yeah.
So that's another, where do you sit? At the back of another car or with somebody else? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. On the paperwork stuff, we touched on it there. Now, the vast majority of it can be done in a contactless way. Are there any areas of paperwork where there are still fishhooks around the need for physical signatures or so forth? Is pretty much everything been signed off in that area yet?
Yeah, I'll talk to that a little bit. I think there's always ways to get documents signed, whether it's how they've signed them historically with out-of-town buyers is a great example, right? And I think dealers have just got to get back to how do we facilitate this? Various systems have allowed for electronic document signing. There are various tools that can be used, but I think it's about also not overcomplicating it too, and ensuring that you can get some customer acknowledgement, customer signature. If you don't have a way of doing that, then you should find out how, because there are plenty of ways you can do it.
And looking forward, this is a less helpful answer than that one. But looking forward, what this has done is help us identify a lot of places where there is contact that doesn't need to be. And so this will be something we in ZTA and the industry need to look at moving forward for the next one, and so I think hopefully we can build some efficiencies out of what we've identified here.
Yeah, I think there'll definitely be some development of this going forward, because I think, Richard, you mentioned being leery even post all of this of taking the car down, but that and that's what we need to realize is that for New Zealand, as we get out of this, as we get out of level 3, as we get to level 2, fingers crossed, level 1, that doesn't mean that COVID-19 doesn't exist in the world. And the Prime Minister's talking today about the trans-Tasman bubble. We're thinking about the Pacific, but how much further beyond that do we go? So the virus is still out there, and as a country, we will still be living with the concerns of a resurgence or another outbreak. At least for, they're saying a year or so for a vaccine, and then, you think about how long it's going to take to vaccinate 8 billion people. That's a long time. So we may be needing to keep in mind and have these practices ready to go for, who knows, another 3-4 years perhaps, before we can feel comfortable that contact returns. And by that point, we may all be so used to digital processes, that people, you'll have kids buying cars going, what's a piece of paper, so yeah.
I think it's an interesting comment from Neeraj Lala of Twitter New Zealand prior to going, well, just as we went into lockdown. They obviously have their store system where all the vehicles are dispatched centrally, and they were pushing to deliver a number of vehicles in the closing days of level 3 originally, level 3 before we did level 4, and they were offering to deliver vehicles and delivering vehicles to the people's houses, sanitizing them in the driveway, and then walking away. But they still had some people not wanting to take delivery out of fear over the disease. So that's people choosing to put those restrictions on, not necessarily the restrictions coming down to what has been mandated or required by the government. People are still going to be, I would suggest, particularly the older buyers or people with immunocompromised, reluctant to transact in the ways that we are used to in the past for a long time after this.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. This is going to come back to a lot of the discussion we've already had, particularly around the test drives and so forth, but it's one that comes with a few fishhooks. And I know, looking around, that one of the major used car vendors in New Zealand, I know, has stopped buying cars during this period for various reasons. But trade-ins, what are the fishhooks in trade-ins? I mean, obviously you've got enormous issues around inspection, sanitization. Any thoughts around how those can be handled, or how people can still deal with trade-ins for those buyers that really need them to be done?
Again, it's I guess it's deploying some common sense.
Yep.
Right. If a trade-in has to be taken, there could be an example, could be a process that you actually need that customer to follow with some degree of sanitization of their own vehicle, and then you would methodically repeat your own procedure over the top of theirs. But again, it's about giving your customer confidence, and not only how you're wanting to treat their vehicle, but you're treating the vehicle that they're purchasing off you exactly the same way. So yeah, I think it's just how do we handle this as if they've got it, as if I've got it. What do we need to do to the vehicle? And I think you can still facilitate trade-ins that way.
Yeah, a trade-in is essentially a reverse test drive, isn't it? Because it's the dealer test driving the vehicle to see whether or not they want to buy it, and what they can do with it, and for their own self-assurance, they're going to want to do what Mark said, which is, you want to be certain that the customer has cleaned the car. But again, if I was running business, I'd probably give it a good clean myself as well before I inspected it, or as I was inspecting it, because you will want to at least run the engine, get it purring, and know that it's a vehicle that you're going to want to take as a trade, give it some value, unless your business model works elsewise.
I'm just going to give you the same answer I gave before. If someone gave you this car and you knew that person had COVID-19, what would you do with it? That's what you should do with it.
Now, this next question is definitely one for you, Kit. And I'm not expecting any great detail, but the overall supply chain through for used vehicles. I mean, how's that looking at the moment? I know we had a lot of issues around the pull out of inspectors from Japan, and that's now being done onshore, and I gather that's going pretty well. Vehicles are able to be trucked and delivered to dealerships at the moment and to compliance shops. Inspectors are back in some compliance shops, I understand. And of course, you can now get, albeit we came very close to having some issues, but you can now get MR2As processed, you can get number plates. How's that all working? I mean, is that well, not necessarily on volume back to pre-COVID levels, but functionally, is it back to a working model?
Yeah, so it is a working model for the most part. There's some question in some areas of New Zealand as to whether necessary components of the system are going to be open. There may only be one provider of a specific service that's necessary, such as inspections, and they may not feel that they could open under level 3. And so that creates an opportunity for someone else to come in with some sort of pop-up business, or it just means that anyone who relies on that service has to wait. But no, the biggest problems we're seeing are related to unusual buildup of stock in certain places. You know, so there was a time where stock could be delivered to compliant shops, but no one could go in and comply vehicles. So now there are a few more vehicles to come in to those shops, but they may still be full, especially if the dealers haven't opened yet for the compliant shops to deliver the vehicles to the dealer, or for the dealers to come pick those vehicles up that have been inspected. So there's just some holdups in the chain with both money going one way and stock going the other. But for the most part, everything is operating.
Now, just on the last question, Greg, I know you have to run, so I'll get you to answer this first. Any last thoughts on what we can expect from level 2? I mean, do you think showrooms are going to be able to open? Do you think yards will be able to actually have people browsing them? What are your thoughts briefly on that before you have to run away?
I wish I had my we're working on this advice at the moment as basically as we speak, and I sort of skimmed our most recent version that we were going to be sending out just recently. I can't for the life of me remember what it said, but it as I said earlier, level 2 is reduce, and there is a lot of there's a bit more freedom in terms of travel, so people are advised to minimize their non-essential travel, but you can, that's about the only restriction. There'll be more gathering. You can have up to 100 people indoors. Distancing, I think, is down to 1 meter for everyone. You can, let's see, it says businesses must operate safely. So I think that there will be the ability for the showrooms to open, but you'll still be under some restriction. You're still going to need to be thinking about your square meterage, your spacing, distances, that sort of thing. If you've got a waiting area, you might need to think about how many people can you have there, and how can you distance ears out and that sort of thing. Make sure that people are sticking to their bubbles. If a couple come in, they can stay together, but they've got to stay away from everyone else. That sort of thing too. There will be more. There's going to be more freedom for everyone in level 2. But I think then the question for anyone in any sort of retail business is how many people are out there looking to spend money, because we're being advised that unemployment's going to go up. Businesses are saying they're going to be closing. So are the customers going to be there? And that's going to be the big thing we're going to need to look for is whether the customers are there. And so one of the things that we're actually thinking about is what we talk to government about that will help encourage activity in the automotive space. And whether that's something like let's bring that scrappage scheme that keeps getting talked out. Let's bring that back out on the table and make it a scrappage scheme that actually encourages people to bring their cars in and take that money and go and spend it on a newer, safer, cleaner car. Do we look at the fuel efficiency incentives? Not necessarily clean car. That's the fee bait that's a complicated thing. Maybe there's a nice simple incentive based on safety ratings, based on fuel efficiency, and we can be incentivizing consumers to come in and buy using those grants based on those incentives. But that's going to be the big thing. I think there will be more freedom in operating. Some distance required, some cleaning still required. Track and trace is still required in level 2. But the real question for anyone trying to sell something is, am I going to have a customer?
Yeah. Just before we go to the next one, if anyone in the audience has any questions, now's the time last chance to kind of throw them in that Q&A. We'll go through them in a second. Mark, you've been polishing your crystal ball.
Yeah, I very, very similar to what Greg said there. I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of continuity of how dealers will be operating under level 3, really, and yes, with some areas that will become a lot more relaxed, of course. But I think it's there for some time, and it's just going to be good business practice to do so. I think there's definitely going to be buyers there. Of course, not as many as there were before. As I say to many that I've spoken to that have been very uncertain, you kind of look at over the last 5-6 weeks how many vehicles would have traditionally been purchased in a retail or a used space, and there's obviously tens of thousands. And I think these initial early signs of how many customers are starting to come back into the market or have needed a vehicle under level 4, haven't been able to get one, and are now able to do so. I think we'll see them progressively climb through level 2. I really like what Greg said about the getting rid of the aging fleet. I'm not sure if you remember, Kit, but many years ago in the US, there was a Cash for Clunkers government scheme, which was I don't know what it was, a couple of $1,000s US for your piece of junk, and it was a hugely successful initiative from what I know. And I think that would be something that would be not only good for the trade, but obviously good for the environment and good for the economy and the public and everything else, to be incentivized to get out of those vehicles that are not safe, not economical, all those reasons, and actually get that money back in through business, and it could be facilitated in quite a simple way. So
the interesting thing with the scrappage scheme is, I believe the MIA came out yesterday, and that's on the list of its things that it's calling for from the government to get its business back up and booming. Though normally I would have thought a scrappage scheme would probably more help the used car industry potentially than the new car industry.
Yeah, it traditionally does, from what I know.
Well, we work closely with the MTA and the MIA, and as in this case, we are definitely one industry just trying to get back to work. So there's been a lot of discussions about things like that as ideas on how to promote the industry and get it moving again.
Yeah, we the key thing we need to do is actually get in front of the government officials and help them understand what went wrong last time, because the previous attempts, as they've been told to me, because I'm still very new to the automotive industry. I've only got 5 years under my belt with MTA, but my understanding is that a previous attempt at a scrappage scheme had things like, it was public transport vouchers as the incentive, and for the vehicle wrecker who took the car, they couldn't actually commercialize any of the parts out of it, no matter how good any of those parts might have been. And those sorts of things are just, you're just creating too much pressure on that scheme. They had to be wafted and regoed. I mean, if a car's wafted and regoed in New Zealand, it's being used. It's someone, because if they've gone to the trouble of waffing it, it's it must be okay. You know,
Yeah, it's all the
New
ones that
Zealand,
aren't.
okay. She'll be right, okay. You know, but it's the other ones that are out there that we've got to get off the roads, and so we need to talk to the government and say, look, you've got to lower your standards about what is acceptable into the scheme, and you've got to make the incentives actually directly relevant to someone, move them into a better transport mode, and we think that's going to be a nice, you know, cleaner, newer, safer car. I'll just say here now, thanks Richard and AutoTalk for putting this together. I actually, the joys of working from home and being on these webinar and Zoom calls and everything is that people lock them up one after the other, and you have to Zoom from one to the next. Zoom. So unfortunately I have to go, but it's been really great talking to you, everyone. Nice seeing you again, Kit. Nice meeting you, Mark, and I hope that the audience got some usefulness out of what we had to say. But yes, I have to go, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg. Now, just to you, Kit, your future thoughts, future predictions. I know you're very much the kind of forward thinker at VIA.
For level 2. Yeah, so I expect that it's going to be all the same requirements. So contact tracing, avoiding cross-contamination, things like that. So it's going to have a lot of the processes that we put in place for level 3 are still going to be useful and necessary in 2, and potentially even 1. So I think it was you, Mark, that said earlier that these are processes that could go on for a long time, and I agree. What will be different, though, is that I think we will be able to have more people in the yard. Maybe they'll open it up to browsing. I don't know. So maybe the public will be allowed to actually shop again. And but I think that there will be guidelines on how many people or bubbles you can have on your yard at any one time. You know, we definitely still want to avoid contaminating bubbles by having too many people from one bubble out and about. You know, when you go grocery shopping, they advise you to just single person do it still, not bring a whole family. So, you know, this horror story that we heard earlier about the whole family who showed up at the yard and they were just running around. That's definitely what we do not want, even in 2. So yeah, I expect it's going to be just as difficult for our industry. I think it will just be a little bit easier for the buyer to get access to us.
Yeah, I think there's an issue out there. I think some people seem to think that level 2 is just going to be kind of world opens again, and that's absolutely not the case, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Let's run through the questions and answers. A lot of these are kind of, I think, opinions as much as questions, which is great to see everyone wants to take part. Now, Mark Vidak, who has had to go, has asked the question, which I guess I'll partially answer first. What changes to your insurance require when you're letting customers go out on solo test drives? When I've bought new cars in the past and used cars, have been allowed on solo test drives. So I suspect that's going to come down to the insurance of your individual yard as opposed to any blanket policy. Would that be a fair call, guys? Like, no?
I have no expertise in this area. Sorry.
I think it's going to be specific to the insurance coverage that the dealership has. Yeah, that will come down to whatever policy that you have in place with your insurer in terms of whether your test drives need to be accompanied or not. And if part of your policy says that they have to be, then that's the opportunity for you to talk to your insurer and see if you can get some form of dispensation under these COVID levels where you can operate with unaccompanied test drives if you follow certain procedures around, you know, again, it's common sense and best practice to be checking the driver's license in any way that you can without being, you know, demonstrating physical distancing and all the rest of it, but being able to identify that person as who they are, et cetera, and go through your process there. So yeah, the one on what's covered and what's not, yeah, that's up to whatever your policy says.
Yeah, pretty much in everything in the industry, I say call your broker.
Pretty much.
On YouTube, Steph Gregor makes the observation, and I think this is very important. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier in regards to this is about being able to show process. I think it's very important that the trader documents their processes so they can satisfy themselves, government, and customers that they are doing everything they can. That's the key thing where you've got rules that are so open to interpretation here, isn't it? It's that showing you followed some form of process.
Yeah, and it's not just important, but it's absolutely necessary. My understanding is that part of WorkSafe's requirement is that there is actual documentation on how the health and safety requirements are going to be met. And there's some sort of indoctrination program for how you're going to educate your employees of those processes that you put in place at minimum.
VIA's issued some form of template for some of the WorkSafe documentation, is that correct?
No, so WorkSafe put together a really good template for that health and safety documentation. And so that's the bare minimum that they think is required. What we've done is we've taken their template and modified it a bit to ask questions that are very specific to our industry, which their template did not have. Their template was just very business general, business generic. So ours was questions like the test driving. And so if you do go and get that from us, what's really important is that both documents are required. Ours is not a replacement for the WorkSafe one. Ours is just a supplement for you to think about industry-specific issues.
Ray Pratt from Auckland Harley says test rides on bikes are happening by appointment, and it's conducted outside of the building, and the machine is washed before the ride and washed down after. It's a lot easier for us motorcycle dealers. I guess it's easy to sanitize something when you can use a water blaster. I'm just going to go across here to check on another question. From Rob M, does anyone have any information on rumours of Auckland dealers being shut down until level 1 for trading in level 3? I'll go on this first. I've heard a couple of rumours from separate sources, and we have put the question to MB, but it's still waiting for an answer. One was a new franchise dealer that was warned. Another was a used car dealer, reportedly, these are rumours, that was shut down. And I understand in both situations they were because people were able to walk around the premises without being challenged as to why they were there. Kit, you sound like you've got, look like you might have some information on this as well.
Well, we had a similar rumor that went around. So we heard that there was a dealer that got pinged. WorkSafe came and this is the rumor I'm telling you right now, is that they showed up, they failed spectacularly, and then they were shut down to level 1. And so we tracked down that rumor to its source, and actually what had happened was the dealership did get inspected, and they passed just fine. So in that particular case, it just, I think every person who told it made it sound worse than it really was. But that said, VIA's advice is to treat everybody who comes on your yard as if they are a government inspector.
So they've got COVID and they're a government inspector.
Exactly. Treat each person that comes on as if they are an expected government inspector.
That's awesome.
Is it like the old thing about, you know, drug dealers and cops? If you ask them if they're a government inspector, do they have to tell you?
Well, unfortunately, that would be great. And that would solve much of this problem, except for the fact that most people probably don't know.
Can you add to your software, Mark, for contact tracing, a tick box to ask whether the person is a government inspector or not?
Yeah, hey, there's a field there that they could record that information for sure. Yeah.
We'll ask this last question because it's one that I think a lot of people are discussing, and it's been in the media a lot the last week. And we've looked at a little on AutoTalk, and it's from Tony Everett, and it's, are you expecting vehicle prices to fall, albeit due to a number of reasons, ex-rentals, trade outs, etc.? How would dealers navigate that if it happens? Any thoughts on that one, guys?
Go, Kit, you must know.
I actually, I don't deal much pricing. I just make sure that they can get through. But you know,
I know
I've
you
heard it
analyze
both
data.
ways.
You analyze data.
I've heard it both ways. I've heard that there is the expectation that prices will fall, but then I've also heard that we can't afford to. Most dealers won't be able to afford to sell a discounted vehicle. So I don't know. I don't think people will sell for less than the vehicle's worth, and I don't think people will forego having a profit. And so dealers. So if that means they don't make the sale, they'll wait for the next one. I mean, so we have lots of vehicles in the country, but one thing that I didn't mention earlier regarding the supply chain is that we don't know what's going to happen in Japan. And so we don't know if it's going to be business as usual in Japan. So and what long-term effect short-term effect, 3 months from now, we don't know. So.
You got any thoughts, Mark?
And purely thoughts, really. Nothing more than what comes out of my mind. I think we were predicting vehicle values to increase pre-COVID with the change in ESC out of Japan. So we already saw the average vehicle value progressively going up to being, a couple of $1,000s more than what it used to be. And I think we would see that kind of continue on in that used space. Yes, there's an oversupply of rental car or lease vehicles that are going to sit around for a while. The number's big, but it's not that. It's a big number to people that don't understand how many vehicles get transacted on a monthly basis in this industry. So I think there's definitely going to be a point in time where I think every dealership has a different business model. Some of the ones that are got a lot of capital in their business, they don't have floor plans, they don't have any kind of consignment or stretch from Japan or wherever it may be. They're in a very different position to somebody that does. So yeah, there might be some discounting out there. There may be some desperation that does kick around, but there's also, I've been a big promoter for a long time now that dealers have got to get back to maintaining a profit in the vehicle and not just have this race to the bottom, and they have to operate sustainable businesses. And I think, if they can progressively work themselves through this period and maintain an acceptable margin that allows them to have a sustainable business, then yeah, I think we'll see patches of it, but I don't think there's this big, as much as the public would love it, this big, huge slash of 50% off vehicle prices, and it's just going to be this big fire sale, because then everyone will just run out of stock anyway. So, and then prices will probably have to go up the other way. So, don't know yet.
I think it's interesting. We saw in the media last week that kind of 30 to 50% slash rate. If you dig into that story that went through the general media, it actually came out of the rental industry and people who had a certain barrier to push about whether they're going to end up holding cars or new vehicle distributors are going to end up holding cars. The rental car distributor doesn't want to end up holding the cars. But the reality is that for someone to go and cut those prices, someone has to take a bath somewhere. And I think the industry is going to probably be a little more collaborative than that, rather than just hanging someone out to dry to lose that money. So for example, if you've got used vehicle exporters with a large amount of stock in the hands of dealers on stretch, we've already seen those companies put conditions in place to ease the pain for those dealers. That's going to alleviate the need for them necessarily to have to absolutely cut price on those cars to get cash flow coming, because all that happens if they do that is they then end up underwater on those cars, and the stretch provider or the exporter is never going to end up with their money back on them. Same with the rental cars and the vehicle stock being held by the used vehicle stock being held by new vehicle distributors. They are all generally companies with fairly large capital bases or international ownership, and the smart ones are going to sit, and they do have an extent the ability to hold that stock. Hertz, while there's been some rumors of them restructuring or so forth in the US, they have the capital in their international thing to sit on some stock in New Zealand that's very small by global definitions, for the sake of not taking a giant bath in it later. Plus, none of these companies are buying cars at the moment, so it's not like they have to replace their entire fleet like they would, because they simply can't replace it. They're not going to sell their fleet because they can't replace it anyway, or they can't justify the cost of bringing it forward. So I think we will see cuts, but not 30 to 50% as was picked by stuff.co.nz and Radio New Zealand and so forth. That's just some people scaremongering for their own purposes. Is my take on the situation.
No, I think you did right, Richard. I think the media, and there's certainly a layer of public perception of huge margins in vehicles as well. That just doesn't, it's not reality. And the margins are very slim comparative to many other industries. So I think for everybody along the way that kind of does generate revenue out of it, the dealer or whoever it may be that has a whole lot of stock to get down to those sort of levels that have been bandied about, just very rarely will we see that happen.
For cuts for that to happen, someone would actively have to hang a customer out to dry, and that's unlikely to eventuate. We'll close with one last comment here from Rob M. Takeaway message: do as much as you can, as responsibly as you can, and cross your fingers you don't slip up when the infected government inspector shows up. I think that's an amusing way to end. So look, thank you everyone for joining us. I'd highly recommend anyone checks out the Motor Central guide. Mark, that's out there for customers, but is there any way people can view that document?
Yeah, I mean, we're happy for anyone to look at it. There's a little bit of stuff in there that's specific to Motor Central, but most of it's general guide, which you'll be able to understand quite easily. It's on motorcentral.co.nz. If you go to our blog page on there, and then if you look a couple of blogs down, you'll see a COVID logo there with how to operate under level 3. It is a live document, so we've been constantly kind of tweaking that and evolving it since it started, and that will take on new shape as level 2 comes about. It'll get updated again, and then level 1 and so forth. So we're happy for anyone to use it, and we reference Via's documentation and link through to there as well, because I think that was great. Policies and procedures is something that used vehicle dealerships it's not a strong point for them. So I definitely think documenting your procedures and actually being able to prove this is how we operate and this is what we're going to do is really important.
And Kit, yet again, I mean, Mark's linking through your documentation there, but where's the best place for people to find that guidance and that WorkSafe material that you guys have sent out to the trade?
Yes, we have our website, of course, just like Motor Central, and it would be under an e-alert. So speaking of which, we actually send out e-alerts to the industry periodically. Right now, we're doing it 2 or 3 times a week, just because there's so many things changing quickly. So we offer advice to the industry. And anyway, you can go onto our website, and at the very bottom, you can just register, just email address and name.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for following along as well. And we'll have this video up and out live on our YouTube channel shortly. We'll post it up on the AutoTalk website, so you can share this out to other staff members or colleagues that didn't get a chance to watch it. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you. See you, Kit. See you, Richard.
Thanks, guys.